What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Scarface. So a little over 3 years ago when I started this YouTube channel, I knew eventually films like Scarface were definitely going to be cataloged here on the channel. I have tons of fun going back and revisiting older films, and yeah, this was one that I knew I always wanted to cover here on the channel at some point. And a big thanks to my buddy Rashad G from Rashad G Reviews for giving me a reason to recheck out this movie. We did a live stream full spoiler discussion over on his channel. I'll leave a link to that down below in the description box so you guys can get our full in-depth thoughts. But as I usually like to do when I do collabs on other people's channels, I like to sometimes do my own video here since the movie is fresh on my mind. I usually have notes written out, and I like to have a different guest join me for my version of the review, and this time around I'm very happy to be joined by Tajaya from Blacktastic Media. So as usual, a big thanks to him for being here in this video. You guys can find the link to the live stream I did with Rashad down below in the description box, as well as the link to Blacktastic Media's channel, and we're going to be hearing from him in just a moment. So Scarface is directed by Brian De Palma, with a screenplay being done by Oliver Stone, the cinematography done by John A. Alonso, the score being done by Giorgio Moroder, and stars people like Michelle Pfeiffer, Stephen Bauer, Paul Shenar, Robert Loggia, Mary Elizabeth Mastro Antonio, and of course the titular character Scarface himself, Tony Montana, played by Al Pacino. So for those of you who don't know, Scarface is actually a remake of a film I believe back from the 30s if I'm not mistaken, and yeah, I saw the movie once a long time ago, long time ago, and I really don't remember it much, so that's definitely going to be a fun revisit one day. But without a doubt, this is the version that's super popular, kind of similar to what they did with The Thing, where the remake is kind of the more popular one a lot of times. Yeah, you know, every here and there are remakes that are better than the original, and this is a case where we have that going on right here. Al Pacino 110% just completely commits to the role of Tony Montana, and though I have some criticisms that we'll get into in a moment, overall I found this film to just be a good fun time to go back and revisit. This isn't a movie that I think even today will still work for everybody. I think this is a movie that more so is going to be for people who are really into film and into performance. Though the story is entertaining, I do think it does have an element of it that feels a little aimless at times, and there are a lot of characters and elements that do feel underdeveloped, even though the film is about 3 hours long. But overall, I do find this film to still be incredibly entertaining. And before I get too deep into my thoughts, I am actually going to have my buddy Blacktastic Media give us his thoughts first, and then we'll get to my thoughts in just one moment.
Yo, what's up? Yeah, it's your boy. Hooking up with my main man, Anthony A. Perez. He hit me up on Instagram. Yo, buddy, hop in your spaceship and fly over to Planet Perez for the 1983 remake Scarface starring Al Pacino. Yes, remake. The original came out in 1932, believe it or not. This movie is beloved pretty much by everybody. Now in 83, I did not see this in theaters. I was a little young. I seen this movie on VHS over at my homie's house. And she was a big fan of Scarface. You know, I'm like, you know what? Michelle, I've never seen Scarface. She's like, what? So back in the 90s, she invited me over, popcorn, pizza, hooked up some hot wings in the oven, and I watched Scarface for the first time. And this movie is so integral in its plot and development. I heard so many stories, a lot of rappers, you know, portraying themselves as Tony Montana. And some people get it, and a lot of people don't get it. This man was born in ruins. He's seen the most horrific elements ever to man. So when he finally got his papers to come to the United States, he wasn't afraid of anything, let alone dying. And you have to keep that in perspective in this film. He came for nothing. He would give up his life in a minute. This man had guns pulled on him and everything. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. This movie is all about the American dream. Whether in a good way or in a bad way, it's still about the American dream. Rich, white women with blonde hair, mansion, drugs, cars, going to fancy restaurants, everybody bowing to you when you walk through the door. And Tony was a little guy. Everybody was taller than him, bigger than him. He might have had a little man's complex. I'm not entirely sure. But his rise to the top and his demise is one of the most fascinating stories ever caught on cinema. Because he watched and learned, and he watched and learned. He met people. He listened very carefully to what they say. You know, when he first met Elvira and the man she was with, Frank, he was like, he was looking at that going, how did this man get her? And she said it, someone's going to kill you one day. You know, you keep showing up in public. He's like, who wants to kill me? Everybody loves me. I'm friends with everyone. Not to mention Tony's best friend, Manny, who's been there since the genesis of this trip, this journey. Manny had the boys back. But there is a bro code. There's some things you just don't do. Even if I had permission from my best friend to date his sister, I probably wouldn't. You know, unless I was absolutely in love for sure and was willing to really put everything on the line for that. I probably wouldn't do it. Speaking of Gina, Tony's sister, they turned their back on him, meaning his mom and his sister, for the way he was living and portraying his life. He still gave them money no matter what. You can only take that kind of money for so long before you changed. And a lot of people get this mixed up in the movie, like Tony was lusting after his sister. No, he was not. He was simply watching her change before his eyes. When she's trying on the fancy dress, and he's sitting there like, money is changing her. When she's dating a guy, he didn't like her. He roughed him up. When they go to the club together, he's watching her. He's like sitting back going, he's not liking the change, but not realizing he is the reason for her changing. He never looked in the mirror at himself for what he did to his family. But one thing I gotta laugh about, man, this movie's damn near perfect, but the scene at the club when Tony's dancing with Elvira, he's asking her name, last name, Hancock, and all that stuff. Tony is a horrible dancer. You got this little short dude jumping up around like a rabbit, and Michelle Pfeiffer, I don't know what the hell she's doing. You know, I'm like, damn, this is corny. This is definitely the worst scene in the movie because this man has no rhythm to save his life. But the rise to the top is short-lived, man. When Manny started dating his sister, he turned on her. Took his life, his best friend. His sister sees this. Eventually, when he gets infiltrated, they take her life. He got so big, so powerful, he couldn't see past his own nose. And everybody around him, he destroyed slowly but surely and took them down, leading to his own demise at the famous scene in the mansion when he gets shot up and falls into the pool. This movie, again, is a tale of the American dream. Be careful what you ask for. But yo, I'm handing it back over to my main man Perez. Thanks for having me on. Scarface, a true American classic. Peace. See you next time.
A big thanks to Tajaya from Blacktastic Media for joining me here in another review. Always a pleasure, my friend, and it's been quite some time since I've had you on the channel, so I figured why not have you on for an absolute classic. I loved hearing your thoughts, man, and I can't wait for the next time I have you here on the channel. Again, you guys can find the link to my buddy down below in the description box. Go give him some love, let him know I sent you. But for now, let's go ahead and get into my thoughts on Scarface. So one of the most interesting connections I've always had with this film is the fact that this movie takes place in Miami. It centers on Cuban characters, specifically Tony Montana, obviously being the lead role, not played by a Cuban actor, and we'll get into that in just one moment. But yeah, this is a movie about, you know, Cubans who come to Florida specifically and want to live the American dream, and specifically Miami. I am born and raised from Miami. I haven't lived there in the last few years, but I go back here and there to go visit. I'm only a few hours away, but I spent majority of my life in the South Florida area, specifically Miami, Hialeah, Miami Gardens, and that whole area. And so, yeah, what I could say overall is I have a huge connection, obviously, to Miami, even though it's pretty crazy nowadays. And it was crazy when I was growing up, too. Florida in general is a interesting state, to say the least. But yeah, revisiting this movie, it just kind of hit me with some nostalgia. You know, obviously, I wasn't around in the 80s, but I was born in the early 90s, so you know there was definitely elements of how Florida was in the 80s that you still kind of saw in the 90s, and even leading into the early 2000s there's definitely areas that are still pretty dated and kind of still have that old-timey feel to it. So rewatching this movie and being able to see places that I've walked around so many times in my life was really awesome to just go back and revisit. And beyond that, it always just kind of had a presence in Miami. You'd go to the corner store or pass by a liquor shop just driving by or just walking around anywhere, and you would see Scarface posters or a cardboard like cutout of Tony Montana, or in the case of my own home where I was living at one point, my uncle literally had some sort of framed Scarface thing that I believe had like a bullet in it. I don't know if it was from the movie or not, and I believe it had something else, maybe a cigar in there. But yeah, so pretty much Scarface has always had some sort of connection to Miami since it takes place there, and I am from there, so I feel like I have a little bit more of a connection with this movie in a way that I just feel like it was always kind of present. Even if I hadn't seen it when I was really young, I knew what it was. And revisiting this movie, I honestly found it to still be a really great time. I would say my biggest criticism, without a doubt, for sure, is the fact that even though the movie is 3 hours long and it does tell a story about the rise and fall of a man chasing the American dream who is just loaded with a power trip and ego, it's a movie that ultimately does have a lot of elements that doesn't really feel fully cohesive. There are a lot of throwaway characters. There are characters that are pivotal to the story for Tony Montana, but their characters themselves don't really have much to do or say. They're just kind of there to, you know, push some sort of plot point for the character of Tony. And so there's a part of that I like, and then a part of that I don't like. A lot of the characters don't really feel like their own characters or characters that you can really latch onto, characters with arcs. They're really just there, like I mentioned, to kind of get Tony Montana to a different place where he's either really angry, maybe he makes a terrible decision because of one of these characters, maybe he trusts one of these characters that, you know, ends up being a bad idea later on. But those characters outside of those moments a lot of times don't really have a whole lot to do, and I would say that's my biggest criticism of the film. And in a lot of cases, that would completely turn me off from a film, and it wouldn't be something that would be nearly as memorable as Scarface. But between the look, the feel, the vibe, the score, the way that this film is shot, the performance given by Al Pacino, and all the supporting cast members, this movie is just overall really entertaining. I think Al Pacino 110% holds this movie on his shoulders. His performance and his, again, rise and fall as the character of Tony Montana is ultimately what really keeps this film engaging from beginning to end. It is consistently intriguing. You're always kind of wondering where it's going to go next. And again, the performances are so good that it keeps you going. Now, I mentioned earlier that they did not cast a Cuban actor to play Tony Montana, and of course, it's Al Pacino. And I think for the most part, he does a pretty good job, but it is a very caricature kind of version of an impression of what a Cuban individual sounds like. Being half Cuban, half Puerto Rican myself, but born and raised in Miami, I spent a lot of time growing up in my life with plenty of true Cubans straight from the island, including my grandparents. And yeah, they had pretty thick accents when they would speak in English if they could. And yeah, for specifically my dad's mom, she has a pretty thick Cuban accent. And yeah, it just does not sound like what Tony Montana is doing here. He's definitely doing a bit of a over-the-top performance here. Definitely an over-the-top, again, caricature type performance that captures captures the essence, but almost feels like a silly impression by today's standards, but it was just a different time in cinema. They probably wouldn't do that again today, but overall, I think despite that, Al Pacino commits, and I think that that's part of what makes this film tons of fun, is that you really do believe him. And even for myself, knowing that he's not a Cuban and being part Cuban myself and spending so much time in my life with Cubans, he still, you know, after a little bit of time, you know, outside of a few lines, you kind of just, you get sold on it. You kind of just dive into the movie and go with it. And I think a lot of that really has to go to Al Pacino and his ability to take this character and make it a character that's interesting to consistently watch, even if you can't relate with this character, even if this character is consistently making you facepalm, even if this character is consistently somebody who's frustrating you. I think that the praise that I can give Al Pacino the most, and the praise I can give this film the most, is the fact that you were consistently interested to see where it's going to go, despite any of the negatives that I may have just mentioned. I honestly don't have an abundance more to say without getting into complete deep dive spoilers, but I'm sure there's a lot of people nowadays who have never seen Scarface before, and since I just recently did a full spoiler discussion live stream over on Rashad's channel, I highly recommend, if you guys want to hear my full in-depth thoughts about all the characters and their role in the story and all of that, please go and check out that video. I'll leave the link down below in the description box. But as far as my basis core thoughts on the movie, if you've never seen Scarface, I think it's a film that if you are a film fan or somebody trying to get into film, or just somebody trying to maybe dive into some of the classics that you've never seen, Scarface is one I think you absolutely have to watch. It is a must watch for any film fan, whether you like it or not. I think it's a movie that you need to have at least seen and be part of the discussion with overall. Again, a big thanks to my buddy Tajaya from Blacktastic Media for joining me here in this review. You guys can find the link to his channel down below in the description box. Go give him some love, let him know I sent you. Always a pleasure to have you on, my friend. And as far as Scarface, yeah, you know, this is a film that is a little overly long with some hollow characters that ultimately would be a negative in a big way for a lot of other movies. But yeah, I think this movie, again, just is consistently entertaining, and there are moments specifically in Al Pacino's performance that completely steal the show, that you're completely captivated. You know, of course, there's the iconic, you know, say hello to my little friend line, but then there's also that fantastic scene in the restaurant where he's drunk. I think that scene is fantastic. I would say the weirdest thing in this movie for me, probably one of the weirdest negatives that I have about this movie, is just kind of this implied weird relationship between him and his sister. I'll leave it at that. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen the movie, go watch it and let me know what you think. But if you're a fan of Scarface, I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. Leave a comment down below. Do you like this movie? Do you not like this movie? Or do you think this movie's overhyped? Do you think it deserves the praise? And if you've seen the original, which one do you guys like more, this one or the original? They've also talked on many occasions about making a remake of Scarface, and I have to ask, is that something you guys would want? So a big thanks to you guys for watching. Please leave a comment down below, subscribe for more videos, hit that like button, because it really all of it, really all of it, please. It all helps the channel out, please. Anyway, a big thanks to you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.